Welcome to the Invest for More Real Estate Podcast. My name is Mark Ferguson, and I am your host. I'm a house flipper. I flip 10 to 15 houses a year. I own 13 rental properties with a goal to buy 100 by 2023. I'm also a real estate agent. I've been licensed since 2001. I run a team of 9. We sell close to 200 houses a year. So on this show, we like to interview house flippers, landlords, and the best real estate agents in the business. So stay tuned for some great shows. If you want more information on my rentals, on the numbers, how I buy properties, check out InvestFourMore.com. Hi, everyone. Mark Ferguson with Invest for More. Welcome to another episode of the Invest for More Real Estate Podcast. I have a great guest on today, Seth Williams, who many of you may be familiar with. He's been a regular on Bigger Pockets, has his own blog, retipster.com, and has kind of a unique story because he is a real estate investor, but he still has a full-time job as well. So many of my guests are already full-time investors, either flippers, landlords, but Seth is doing this part-time, talks about how that works, how he can do it with a full-time job, and kind of give a different perspective on real estate investing. So Seth, great to have you on the show. How are you doing?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing very good. How about you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for being on the show. So I always like to kind of get a perspective on where people came from, how they got started. So tell us, how did you first get interested in real estate investing, and kind of where were you coming from at that point in your life?
Yeah, well, I think like a lot of people, I first got turned on to real estate after reading, the famous book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I was in college at the time, and it just, for a lot of reasons, it just made sense. Robert Kiyosaki had a great way of explaining it, and I just knew it was something I had to pursue more. But the problem was, it was about like 2004, 2005 at that point, and I started, getting on my local MLS listings and, okay, I got to find a rental property now. This is how I got to do it. And I started trying to find deals out there, and I was running the numbers and trying to just find a deal that would work. And like nothing would work. Like even if I offered way below the typical asking price of some of these houses and duplexes, like it was so far off. I just didn't see how it was possible. And I eventually realized that I was kind of looking in the wrong places. I was looking where everybody else was looking. And I had to sort of find a source of deals where it was kind of like the secret area where nobody else was looking. And I eventually stumbled across the niche of land investing, which was something that when I first heard about it, it sounded kind of like, really? Land? Like seriously? Why would anybody buy land? I didn't really get it. But the way the strategy works is you actually buy land from certain demographics of people who are, typically highly motivated to sell their property. And you can buy this land for just crazy, crazy low prices. Well, probably one of the biggest sources that I use to get land deals is the delinquent tax list, which I can get from the county. And it's a list that, a lot of people don't necessarily know about or don't think about, but it's a list that every county in the country has. And usually it costs money in most cases. And it just comes in the format of an Excel file that you can get it. Really, this list just contains everybody in that county who currently is back due on their taxes. And you can put together a mailer, send it out to them. And a lot of these people will respond and just be very highly motivated for one reason or another. And that's kind of one of the reasons they're on that list, is because it's a big red flag for all of them saying, for one reason or another, I want my property. I don't care about it. Somebody get this off my hands. And yeah, it's been a really, really good strategy for me. And land in particular is usually the number one type of property that I'm trying to buy, because land is a very, very easy, it's just a very simple type of property. There's no issues that go wrong with it. Typically, it's just dirt. There's nobody trashing the property or stealing things. Nothing's breaking down. You can sort of buy it and walk away from it for a decade and come back, and it's still going to be there, just like when you first bought it. So for a lot of those reasons, land, and then in combination with this delinquent tax list, has been just a really cool strategy for me to use. So
nice. No, it's an interesting strategy that we haven't talked about at all, and I haven't even written about on my blog because I don't do it myself. I have bought a lot when prices were dirt cheap and sold it a couple of years later. But that's the extent of my land investing. That was an MLS deal. I'm curious now, when you're buying land, I mean, what was your first deal? What did that look like, and how scary was it, and how did it turn out?
Yeah. Well, the first deal I ever did was in a county just to the north of where I live. And I just kind of picked sort of a random county that was nearby and did one of these mailings. I got a call back from a guy who was living in California, and he hadn't seen this property in like 20 years. And he had just been paying these tax bills, and he saw a way to get out of it. And that was why I called, man. And so I made an offer for just over $300 on his property. It was a half-acre lot. He accepted the offer and sent the signed agreement back to me. We literally just closed the deal by mail. He sent me the stuff I needed, and I sent him the stuff he needed, and it was all good. And I sold the property about 2 weeks later for $1,900. So, I mean, it wasn't, not huge, like quit your job type dollars or anything like that. But I mean, when I compared that to a lot of the other investing strategies out there, like house flipping and, buying rental properties, it was like, here is a property that I can buy with just kind of the cash I have in my pocket. I mean, there's really almost no risk here. I mean, even if everything went horribly wrong, it's like, I can afford to lose $300 and it's not going to ruin my life. And that gave me a lot of comfort. And it was, I mean, the first deal or two was a very slow moving process, just in terms of trying to figure out how the mechanics of everything worked and, just how this all, works. But it was fine. And it really wasn't a difficult process. And when I saw how the deal worked and how quickly it happened and how low risk it was, I kind of realized, like, man, I could do this a lot more, and I could just find bigger versions of this and just sort of replicate it and scale it up. And that's kind of what I've been able to do over the years.
Very cool. It's an interesting strategy. I know a lot of people who want to get started investing in real estate, like you said, they don't have a lot of money. They don't have a lot of capital to start out with. If you try to flip a house, it's really difficult to do it without money, even with hard money lenders, even with private money. You still need your own money. Mm-hmm. You need to be able to find the deal. Rental property is the same thing. You need quite a bit of money to get started usually. So a lot of people turn to wholesaling, but you still need money for wholesaling. You got to send out your marketing. But this is kind of a new twist on a way to get started without a whole lot of money if you can find that cheap land. So it's very interesting. Yeah. I'm curious now, are you seeing prices that low on land, or have things really changed as far as being able to find deals like that?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about this strategy is that the properties you buy are never, ever, well, maybe not never, but 99% of the time, they're going to be properties that are not listed with a realtor, because we're buying from people who are, I mean, they frankly just don't care. I mean, if I'm buying a property for $100, it would obviously be very easy for that person to just stick a for sale sign in their yard, and somebody would probably buy it for 5 times more than that,
right?
Or a lot more than that. But these people, I mean, that's kind of just where they're coming from. Is they're not. They don't think like you and I do in terms of like, okay, I want to get as much as I can out of this property. That's not really what they're concerned about. They're more just, this thing is a nuisance in my life. I want it gone. Somebody just help me out and take this away. And so given that, in terms of prices going up, I mean, I think there might be, maybe a little bit just in terms of people who kind of see what's going on around them. But by and large, if somebody's concerned about price at all, they're not working with me, because I'm not making an offer that's more than 20-25% of a property's market value. I don't go there. So it's a very specific demographic of people that I work with, and it's people who just kind of don't care. And there's not a lot of those people out there, but the trick is understanding how to find them. And once you know where those sources are, the process gets a lot easier.
Very cool. Now, are you finding when you are looking for these certain people, are you going to certain areas, maybe with lower priced land, or are you looking all over the place and just base, your deals on that percentage, or is there a certain specific place you kind of look for those?
Yeah, well, when you're dealing with land specifically, I try to focus in, like, just for example, like looking at the market of Chicago. Cook County is not a county that I would ever look in for vacant land. First of all, because there probably isn't much vacant land, because it's such a densely populated area. But even if there is vacant land in a county like that, it's probably going to be in like the rattiest, junkiest part of town where you don't want to own anything, period. So usually where I'm looking is like in the radius around those counties, like basically in a place that's about a 1 to 2 hour drive from the nearest major metropolitan area, because those kind of places are sort of seen as like a home away from home, like a retreat where these people from the city can go and visit their land and then come back type thing. Those are the sort of areas where like there's more of like a beauty sort of seclusion factor to it. And people are more willing to buy those properties and like build a new home on it, that kind of thing.
Very cool. Okay. So that makes sense. Most likely the most valuable land, people aren't just going to let go very cheap. And there's going to be more people going after those deals too, or looking for that land. I'm curious, when you buy this and when you try and sell it, are you using an agent to sell it yourself or using your own marketing? How do you sell the land?
Yeah, good question. There have been a couple of cases where I've tried to use agents just because I just sort of wanted more feet on the street trying to get properties sold. But I found that even when I was doing that, I ended up finding the buyer, which kind of surprised me, honestly. I figured, this is what they do. They're going to totally do this like way faster than I can. But that's never been the case. I don't know if it's just, I don't know. I'm not really sure why, but I know that when I get my properties, I'm very motivated to get that thing sold ASAP. And I'm working hard at it. I'm creating, really good ads. I'm putting them all over Craigslist, all over every site I can possibly think of. And usually if the deal's a good deal, somebody's going to call me pretty quick and the deal's going to happen. Because, remember, I'm buying these properties for like almost nothing, which means I can list them for half of market value or somewhere in that range. And it's a really good deal on the open market. A lot of people are going to jump at that opportunity unless there's just some fundamental issue with the property. So in a lot of these cases, the properties sort of sell themselves if you just get the word out and just get it in front of as many eyeballs as you can. So for that reason, I haven't really needed realtors a lot in my business. I've kind of done a lot of it myself.
No, that makes sense. And I imagine too, those low prices, it's tough to find agents who are very motivated. And how would you even structure the commission when you're selling a $2,000 or $3,000 lot?
Yeah. Well, and that's another thing. Yeah, that's correct. Usually when I've tried to use agents, it's more when the property is worth like $50,000, a much higher dollar amount. And so I think for those types of deals, it probably makes more sense for them to get involved. But yeah, when they're the rinky-dink properties, which I honestly don't do a lot of those anymore, just because I've learned that my time is better spent pursuing fewer deals that are larger.
No, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
So you've done this land investing strategy. Very cool. I haven't heard of that before, but I do like it. But you also have a full-time job still. So you're actually a commercial banker.
Yeah, that's right.
Tell me about your job. How is it being a commercial banker? What's your day-to-day life look like? And what kind of deals do you do in your job?
Yeah, my job, I actually work for a small business financing company. And it's another sort of niche thing in the commercial banking world. We do SBA loans, which is like a government guaranteed loan program. And it's pretty interesting. The way an SBA, it's specifically called the SBA 504 loan. And the way those loans work is a bank will come in and finance 50% of a deal. And then SBA will come in and finance usually 40% of that deal, which means the borrower only has to put in 10%, which is, pretty low down payment for a commercial mortgage. So it's a benefit for the borrower because they don't have to put a whole lot down. And it's also a benefit for the bank because they've got 50% loan to value because we're in second position behind them. And really, it doesn't always make sense for everybody. And there's a lot of eligibility factors to, think about just to even qualify for the loan. But in the situations where it works, it really makes a lot of sense and can be a huge benefit for all parties involved.
I've heard of those loans before, but I'm definitely not an expert. What types of properties do those loans work for?
Yeah, it's intended for real estate and equipment, particularly for small businesses who are going to occupy that real estate. Typically the types of properties we would do in our area anyway, we do a lot of like manufacturing facilities, restaurants, really anything you can think of that qualifies as commercial real estate that is actually occupied by the owner.
So you can actually get a lower down payment on large commercial projects than you can as a rental property as an investor owner.
Yeah, and that was part of the intent with the government's program is that, I mean, part of the reason it exists is to encourage businesses to create jobs. So that's why they're not really interested in investors. They're more interested in companies who are going to, grow the economy through what they're doing in that actual building. That's kind of to help them grow and all that.
Right. No, it makes sense. I mean, that's one reason why the tax advantages are so great on rental properties. It's because the government tries to encourage people to invest in real estate, which helps the economy. And yeah, same thing. The more small businesses there are, the better the economy is. So the government tries to push that. Makes sense. So how has being a commercial banker helped you with your real estate investing? I imagine there's definitely some synergy there.
Yeah, absolutely. I really didn't plan it that way. It's just sort of how it worked out. But what I do specifically is I do a lot of loan closings and a lot of underwriting, just in terms of getting deals approved on the front end. And it's helped me in really both of those ways, in terms of understanding what a good deal looks like, and then also on the closing end, just understanding the mechanics of how you close a deal. It took me a while to figure it all out, and it's helped me a lot in my land business, just because closing a deal, it's something that seems just very confusing to a lot of people. And that's why, title companies are brought into the mix and closing attorneys to handle all this stuff. And in many cases, that's appropriate. I mean, it's good to have people who know what they're doing, handling those really important documents and transactions. But when you're doing a cash deal for land, it's a fairly straightforward, fairly simple thing if you understand the paperwork. And so, I mean, a lot of the deals that I've bought and sold, I've closed myself, simply because there's not a lot of paperwork required. It's like a deed, a purchase agreement, and maybe a property transfer affidavit. I mean, those are sort of the basics, and a few others if you want to kind of cover various liability things. But yeah, it's really not hard, and I've been able to kind of demystify that for some people who have wondered about how to do that sort of thing themselves, particularly with a lot of these ultra cheap deals that buy and sell for a few $1,000. I mean, when you're only talking about those dollar numbers, it doesn't always make sense to pay another $500 to $1,000 to bring a professional in to handle all this stuff when you can do it yourself. So that's kind of through necessity. I sort of learned to do a lot of that myself through my deals.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, you pretty much eat up your profit. If you bring in an agent, you bring in a title company, you bring in, a closer, then it doesn't make much sense. I'm curious, when you did these deals, do you get title insurance from the bank, from the title company, or do you just kind of do your own due diligence? How do you figure out if there's any other liens against the properties?
Yeah. Well, the way that I have handled it, and I'm not saying everybody necessarily should do this because it kind of takes some know-how to do this, but I've done a lot of my own title searches where I just get an abstract of title and I look through, all of the documents on record. And I can kind of trace, one document to the next, and I can just pinpoint whether there's any clouds on the title. And if there's not, then I'm comfortable closing that. And I typically do that if the total market value of a property is like less than $10,000, just because we're talking small numbers. When it gets over that, and there's the possibility that I could mess something up, I don't really want to mess around with those kinds of huge dollar amounts. So I'll typically get a title insurance policy and maybe even just have a title company do the whole thing if it's a bigger deal like that, just because I don't want to gamble with that kind of thing. But just on those smaller deals, it's I just handle a lot of that research myself.
No, that makes sense. I imagine, yeah, the more money involved, obviously, the more risk there is and the more sure you want to be of what you're actually buying. Getting back to the commercial side of the banking, I know you don't exactly work with residential loans and different things like that, but you are on the banking side and know what's required and what impresses bankers. So do you have any tips for people who are, looking to find local banks or smaller banks to work with for impressing them or showing them that they're a real investor and are somebody worth investing in?
Well, and it helps to have cash coming out your ears that you don't even know what to do with. That's always encouraging to bankers. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the deals that I'm underwriting, I'm really more looking at like what does this business do and how viable is this business? Not necessarily on the individual level, like I said, but yeah, I mean, like the 5 C's of credit. Like if you can have like a good credit score, have good character, have cash on hand, a lot of these things that just sort of make you less of a risk to a bank is very helpful. A lot of banks out there kind of have this like cookie cutter mentality when they're looking at residential stuff. I think it was, I was listening to your podcast. I think it was with Danny Johnson a while back when you were talking about finding a good portfolio lender versus one that will only allow like 4 mortgages and then you're done kind of thing.
Right.
That's kind of thing. Like, I think a smart lender will actually like, use their head and like think about like actual variables that could affect it rather than just saying, nope, you're done at 4. See ya. So I think a lot of the importance is finding the right lender too, just somebody who's willing to be flexible and think outside the box a little bit. But at the same time, it's you also have to think about yourself, and be honest about it. Like, I mean, there are always going to be opportunities, that honestly are great opportunities, but they're just out of your reach. Like it brings your risk level to a point that's just shouldn't be acceptable to you. And I think it's really hard as an individual who's trying to grow and, find these opportunities. It's hard to stop yourself and to just be wise about when you shouldn't keep going and when you should just kind of just hold off for a bit, build up your reserves and hit it again later. It's very difficult to balance that perfectly. Usually you're going to be either too ambitious or not ambitious enough. But the closer you can get to that line through your own just honest thought process, the better.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And I think what I'm hearing you say too is it's not just the borrower who has to impress the bank, but it has to be the right deal. You're looking at the business too. I mean, you could have the perfect borrower in the world, but if you look at their business model and there's no possible way you could ever make money with this, you're not going to lend on that business. I mean, it's kind of a combination of it's got to be the right borrower. And if they're buying properties, it's got to be the right property too. Show you can make money on it. Yeah,
absolutely. It's honestly, it can be a very, very, very complex equation in the end, especially with like businesses and that kind of thing. There's a lot of things, a lot of variables that can make or break a deal. And sometimes, if you've got Bill Gates looking to buy a rental property, I mean, there's not very much thought required in that. It's just okay, approved, but if most people and most loan applicants just have a lot more stuff to consider. And there's always going to be some risk at the end of the day. It's just a matter of getting to the minimal level or as small as possible.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And like you said, if the banks are super concerned about you buying more properties, maybe your debt to income ratio is too high, maybe that's a sign that you should slow down or you should reduce your debt or, find a way to fix that, because that's kind of a warning sign to the bank that in their past history, that's a big risk. So maybe that should, instead of looking to get around that, maybe you should look at ways to improve that figure so you are at less risk.
Yeah, I can think of just a couple deals off the top of my head where we ended up doing them and they just went south almost from day one. Like we never should have done them, but it's kind of funny. I think the reason we ended up doing it was because we had these borrowers who were just pushing us so hard and they were so good at selling themselves. They just had the passion, and it's kind of funny, like just the whole human element. I mean, we all have emotions we have to struggle with and deal with and kind of keep under control. And these people, I mean, they just, in their minds, they were unstoppable. But I mean, when it came down to it, like it was just a bad deal and they never should have done it. And we never should have done it. And it's just, it's kind of thing where a lot of times you're not going to hear the voice of reason coming from the borrower necessarily, because they're not necessarily thinking about how is this going to be a disaster. They just kind of want to get it done and move on to the next thing. But a lot of the questions that we have to go through are very reasonable and are important questions to ask.
Great advice. And I think a lot of people can learn from that if every bank you're talking to is turning you down, maybe it's not that you need another bank, but you need to work on why they're turning you down and fix that. So
yeah, absolutely.
So you've got your land investing, your full-time commercial banking job. You also started a blog. So tell me about your blog, why you started it, and how that experience has been.
Yeah, my blog, retipster.com, started that back in late 2012. Yeah, it was really kind of, I mean, I don't know about you. How long has your blog been going, by the way?
March 2013. So probably real similar to when yours started, maybe a little later.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you got into blogging or why you got into blogging, but I never really understood the point of blogs. I just didn't get it. I didn't get why anybody cared about them. But it wasn't until late 2012 when a friend told me about Pat Flynn's blog, Smart Passive Income. You've probably heard of that.
Yes.
Most people in the blogosphere, it's just a household name now. He's a very well-known guy. And when I saw what he was doing, I was just like, man, this is awesome. Like, this guy is just amazing. Just putting out a lot of extremely helpful stuff that people would, should gladly pay money for because it's very valuable. But he was just like giving it all away for free. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, his blog is all about like online business and that kind of thing, which doesn't really correlate to real estate. But I saw that and I'm like, man, I want to be that guy in the real estate world. And I mean, most of my experience was in kind of a niche thing with land investing. It wasn't what most people were talking about in terms of, rental properties and house flipping. But I just wanted to sort of be that guy in my particular space and put as much helpful information out there as I could. I didn't realize this when I started doing it, but like, it is a lot of fun. Like, I really, really enjoy it. It takes, a lot of time to put some of these blog posts together. But I mean, once the final product is out there and it's very well done and it really helps a lot of people and a lot of people give good feedback, I just find that really, really rewarding to know that, like, yes, I nailed that problem and really found a solution for people. And yeah, it's been really fun. I've gotten a lot of good feedback and something I hope to do a lot more of in the future.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And yeah, when I first started, I had no idea what I was doing. I hadn't written an article since college. And I just, like, I kind of had my, not really a niche, but I had my rental properties and I knew how to get more mortgages. And I'm like, hey, I'll just start writing a blog. I had to have my friend help me because I had no idea how to set it up. And I just started writing articles. And like you said, people started responding and like, hey, thanks for your help. This really helped me out. I'm like, wow, someone cares what I wrote about. This is cool. So,
I know, it's very cool.
Yeah. And it just kind of ballooned from there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a ton of fun for me too.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. And not only do you have your blog, but you've got some ways to help people get started with land investing as well, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd written a lot of just articles and random tidbits of information about how to do the land investing business, how to do other things that I've got my hands into. Like, I own a couple duplexes and just explaining how to analyze that kind of thing. Stuff I'm sure you've probably written about as well. But I had a lot of people saying, like, do you have a more organized, system or something to follow to actually start this kind of land business? And I had just kind of a string of blog posts, but nothing like that well formulated from start to finish. And so, yeah, we just recently put together, it's like a membership website where as part of the membership, you get a 12-week course on start to finish process of land investing. So, yeah, I've been trying to create a better, more organized system for people to follow with that. There's also a forum as part of that membership website. And yeah, it's been pretty good so far. We've had a lot of signups and good conversations happening in our forum. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Very cool. Yeah. And we'll definitely have a link to your website and to that membership as well. So people can reach you there.
Sure.
I mean, you mentioned duplexes. Is that what you see as your future kind of investment vehicle, is real estate, or are you doing different things, kind of diversifying? What's your current investing strategy?
Yeah, good question. My ultimate goal is to, probably do more, duplexes and residential rental properties. I'm also looking at trying to get into actual farmland because it's land. It's an area I kind of know a little bit, but it's kind of like a rental property just without the tenant aspect of it and without the building aspect. It's just sort of dirt, and you get paid to lease that dirt out to people. So I'm looking at trying to do farmland at some point as well. And my strategy with the land flipping is to sort of, for a while there, I was trying to do like seller finance land. And I think that's absolutely a great way to build up passive income through selling land. And I still have a couple like that out there as well. But recently, like in the past couple of years, I've been trying to sell my properties for all cash when I can, because I'm trying to take that cash and plug it into other things that are going to be more permanent sources of passive income. So that's kind of what I've been trying to do with the duplexes and all of that. So that's my current strategy.
Nice. I'm curious. You mentioned farmland, but I imagine most of the land you're buying, lots and different things like that, they don't really have any source of income if you're owning them. It's like you said, it's just dirt. So do you ever hold any of these for maybe if they're close to future development? Are you kind of looking at long-term goals with any of them, or are you just trying to get out of them quick and get your money and put it into something else?
Yeah, I've got a couple that I'm basically just kind of in a holding pattern on, but by and large, I would say that the intent, like the reason I'm buying these is to resell them ASAP. It's not because I'm hoping that someday, 30 years from now, it'll, have a booming population nearby. That's not really, that's just too long to wait for me. I just kind of want to get in, get out and make my money when I can. That's kind of been my strategy. And as far as the income thing goes, I'm not saying you can't do this, but I've never rented the land out. It's been more of, when I sell it, I'm selling it to people with seller financing, and then they can, usually with their first payment or two, I'm getting made whole with all the money that I put into it. And then for the next 5 years, these monthly payments are like pure profit because I bought them for so cheap in the first place. And a lot of times when you're selling these with seller financing, you can justify, a much higher asking price, because these buyers are mostly concerned with, can I afford this monthly payment? Like that's kind of the number one thing you're looking at. So it adds a lot of cool benefits to your ability to sell properties and make more money on them, if that's the kind of, approach you're trying to take.
Right. No, it makes perfect sense. Very cool. I'm curious with the farmland. I have no idea how that works, but I imagine it's basically like rental properties, but you're just renting the land out to farmers. Do you know? They have longer term leases? Are they looking at different things when they're trying to rent land?
Yeah, it's. I'm actually kind of still in the learning process too. I think my struggle with farmland that I'm sure there's an answer. I just haven't figured it out yet. Is that it's not the same approach where I'm buying these from people who don't care about it. Like the sellers would be more reasonable, normal people who are expecting a market value asking price. So it's not quite as much of the buying it for pennies on the dollar thing. I've actually got a cousin-in-law who lives in Iowa, and he's a farmer. And he's kind of the one that sort of got me thinking about this. In farmland prices in places like Iowa and Illinois, we're talking some of the best farmland in the world. It can get very expensive there. But on the same coin, you can also ask for a lot more in your annual lease. So usually the way it works is, you'll get either one lease payment for the year, and then that farmer will farm it for the entire year round, or you can get it, at different segments throughout the year. But in terms of it's a very hands-off thing. I don't have to really ever check in on it. It's just they make the payment, and then it's their land to do what they will with. So yeah.
Interesting to see these different strategies that I haven't thought about. But yeah, I imagine there's so many different ways to make money in real estate.
Yeah.
You're always going to find something new. So it's very cool.
For sure.
Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to cover with you. Before we end this, though, any advice you can give out there for people, looking to get into real estate, looking to start, building some kind of investing portfolio? What's some advice you can give to people who haven't been exposed to real estate yet, but really want to get involved and get into the business?
Yeah, good question. A lot of different directions I could go with that. It would kind of just depend on what specific kind of strategy or niche that they are interested in pursuing. But just as it pertains to mine, the land investing business, I would say just before you jump in, make sure you just have a plan and you're not just sort of wildly throwing money all over the place, expecting things to happen. Just make sure you understand to some extent what you're doing. You don't have to be an expert at it. A lot of it is kind of figuring it out as you go. But for example, like I got started with direct mail campaigns, and they were extremely effective. But the only reason they were effective is because there was very specific steps I was taking. I wasn't just getting any lists, and I did a lot of sorting to it, did a lot of work on the specific message I was sending out to them. So, it's important to take action, but it's more important to take intelligent action and make sure that you're, just following a very well laid out plan that makes sense for what you're trying to pursue. And then also, I would just say, make sure you have, decent funds to work with, either whether it's your money or somebody else's. Just make sure you have what you need to actually do the job. Like I only had about $3,000 to start with when I got started, but that was really all I needed. And that was one of the benefits of the land, is that it didn't require a lot. But if I only had like $200, I wouldn't have gotten very far before everything would just stop. So just make sure that your guns are fully loaded before you just start charging out into the field.
Great advice. And yeah, I think in anything you do, any kind of investing, so many people try to get into the no money required, invest with absolutely none of your own money. But in the long run, the more money you can save, the more of your own money you have, the easier it's going to be and the better off you're going to be. And the shortcuts usually don't work out well in the long run.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome. Great. Well, Seth, I really appreciate you being on the show. Before we leave, if people want to contact you, what's the best way to get in touch with you? Is it through your website? How can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, I would say go check out the website, retipster.com, and there's a contact page there. You can also hit me up on Twitter or Facebook or Google Plus or any of those things. I'm everywhere. So yeah, just reach out if you got any questions.
Very cool. Yeah, and we'll have links to get in touch with you as well on the blog. So great. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for doing the show. I'm sure we'll be in touch here, and I hope you have a great weekend coming up here.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Mark. Appreciate it.